people will look at a leader and say, that person was a born leader. And to me, I wasn't born a leader. And to me, leaders are developed and they're not born that way.
This week on the Shameless Podcast.
I once worked for a leader who every couple of years would change the layer of people underneath him in management. And this individual did that to hide his own inefficiencies. Now, I call that moving the chairs on the Titanic.
And I guess that's the whole idea, right? About building strong teams, resilience that are able to stand the test of time. It's that having that dedication towards that quest.
I had to tell this team that their jobs were going away at some point. So I wrestled for a week trying to figure out what I was going to say to this team. So I met with the team as a whole. I made them 3 promises. And what I wrestled with was, what would I want my boss to say to me if my going away?
And sometimes that job title does not equal leadership. A leader can be without a job title. And these tools and tips and tricks and trades, I think the insights that you do share within your book allow for people to stand over and beyond that space. Sometimes we are afraid to do something. You fear shame. I don't want shame. We're trying to break that burden by sharing stories of courage, resilience, and we want to be able to celebrate your story.
Shameless.
Miss Family, welcome to today's episode. You know what? I have been so excited because Jim is an individual who I was supposed to talk to, then I had to postpone, and now we're finally at it, and we're going to be talking about the 6 pillars of effective leadership, building leaders that last. So, Jim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
And I think for me, a lot of what we talk about on this podcast really is reflected within your book that you've written. And that's all centered around people who find themselves in a leadership position and then they need a sort of a roadmap towards getting there. Would you please do our viewers or listeners a little bit of a favor and give them maybe a preamble, number 1, of yourself, but then secondly, just a little bit about the book, maybe just the titles or what are those six pillars, and then we can dive in straight away.
So one of the things that I have learned throughout my life is and you've probably heard it yourself, people will look at a leader and say, that person was a born leader. And to me, I wasn't born a leader. And to me, leaders are developed and they're not born that way. There may be scientific evidence that suggests there's a certain gene that a lot of professionals, that a lot of leaders have, but I don't think that makes them a good leader. And I have been blessed by having worked with some very great leaders in my career. And I'm a testament to the fact that leaders aren't born that way. And let me tell you another reason why. If I look at my own heritage, my dad was a carpenter. His dad was a mason. My great-grandfather was a chicken farmer. There is no CEO, CSO, or CRO, or any C-suite title in any of those individuals that I have my genetics from. And so to me, when I look at my journey in leadership, it has evolved over the 30 plus years that I've been in various management roles. And it will continue to evolve as society changes and as generations change. So when I look back, I graduated college in 1983, makes me an old man. When I graduated in 1983, leadership at the time, or management, because at the time they really didn't talk leadership, it was all management. Yeah. And management was really more authoritatively done than it is today, which is more collaborative, allowing people to develop and grow and figure out problems versus telling them how to do it back in the 70s and 80s.
So then, hold on. And I know that we're going to get into the pillars, but you just struck a nerve there, because that whole concept of an authoritative leadership style versus a collaborative one is the authoritative one really that bad? I mean, if I'm looking for results, if I'm looking to get action, if I'm looking to move things, move the dial, I mean, in an army, I can't be all collaborative and, all of that. I need to drive so surely there
a
might
difference
be actually
between being a manager and being a leader.
Do tell
A
me.
manager will manage the details and will push on the things that need to be changed. A leader is a visionary who sets the tone and the strategy. Now, I happen to be a leader who likes to get his hands dirty as well. So I can operate at 500 feet, but I also like to be at ground level solving problems with my teams as well. And in order to build trusting and high producing teams, a leader has to come prepared to be transparent and to be able to roll up their sleeves and get them their hands dirty and be able to help explain to people the better way to get things done.
But I mean, at the end of the day, we're all striving to get results, right? And if the authoritative way of driving results gets the result, I mean, whether it's a manager or leader, I mean, so what? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate, right? Because some people might argue that this notion of being collaborative and involving takes away a lot of the time the idea of getting to the result. And I'm curious to understand your view.
So I can understand the position, but when I look at a team, they look at the team looks at the leader for guidance, to be the visionary and to be that person that can help them become successful. And teams that I have managed have been high producing, highly productive, but extremely loyal
Yeah.
because of the framework that I use in managing. And so let's just dive in and I'll give you the first example.
Go for it.
My number one pillar that is non-negotiable is integrity. You have to operate with impeccable integrity if you're going to build trust with your team and create a following. You have to be transparent and you have to be consistent. And to me, I learned integrity the year I graduated college. I did two things when I graduated college. Number one, I got a job. But the second thing I did in the town I lived in is I ran for local city government.
Okay.
And I was elected at the age of 22. And the city manager called me and asked me if I would come in and spend a couple of minutes with him. And so this is 1983. There were no cell phones. So, we schedule time. I go in and sit down and we start talking.
Imagine
He said,
that.
he said, I want you to do me one favor. He said, you're a smart guy. You're going to do extremely well for this community. But what I'm going to ask you to do is every night when you put your head on the pillow and before you close your eyes, ask yourself this one question. Did I do anything today for my own personal self-benefit that was at the expense of an individual, a group of individuals, or an organization? And then he went on and said, if you answer yes to that question, you have to do two things immediately. Number one, figure out if you can unwind it. And number two, figure out how to never do it again. I have led my entire life on that path of integrity without ever wavering. And the people that work on my teams know that. And they also know that my expectation is that they'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
And it hit me really hard when I left that office because that question was so powerful. It really scared the bejeebies out of me about what am I getting myself into? But it has guided my life.
And so I guess that's beautiful because the idea of integrity feeding into trust, following loyalty, I guess what you're saying is the foundation of what you've done through and through. I'm curious to understand that obviously it is easier said than done. It is easier to not do something at somebody's expense or whether it's on purpose or by mistake, at the end, the victim is the victim, right? How do you then ensure that you are keeping that idea, that notion as the number one thing to keep driving you? Or are they tools or tricks or trades or, something that allows for you to just be able to make sure that you always center back to that point?
So it did not take long because when you ask yourself that question before you go to sleep, if you actually answer that question with a yes, you got to figure out how to fix it. And I never wanted to be in a position where I would have to fix it. And so I said, if you think of a line down the middle of the road, if I always stay on that line and I'm always consistent with that, I will have much a much tighter connection with the people that I'm leading and working with. And while you use the word foundation, I look at that pillar as the center pillar holding up the weight of the roof. And the other pillars are supporting the roof as well. But without that center pillar, that roof collapses.
And so, and I would like to maybe circle back on an area where within certain organizations, within certain environments where it might be a bit toxic, it might be a bit competitive even, right? And also where we're looking at ourselves from either short-term gratification or a quick win. The idea of using or trampling, or maybe this instance, I won't necessarily, I will leverage this individual to get my foot up, to get my foot in the door, to get one up and progress my career, or to ensure I don't get into trouble. I think I'm curious to understand, is it always as easy as you make it out to be? I mean, it's that center line on the road. Is it that easy to say, I'm going to stay on this path? Or did you find yourself at times also getting off the path, and then how did that work for you? And how did you build from that point?
So it is hard because we're creatures of environment and social things that are hitting us all the time. But if you keep grounded in the fact that you always want to do the right thing, you will, in fact, always do the right thing. And I've had employees who have said to me, you are consistent, you are reliable, and you always take the right path. Because once you start doing that and you realize how the people around you who aren't operating with integrity, you understand that those environments are toxic. And I've worked for some toxic leaders in the past. And when that happens, and I realize that, I start to look for another way, either another department or another company, because eventually it falls apart. I'll give you an example. I once worked for a leader who every couple of years would change the layer of people underneath him in management. And this individual did that to hide his own inefficiencies. Now, I call that moving the chairs on the Titanic. The Titanic will eventually sink,
Yeah.
and that manager or leader will eventually be exposed and it falls apart. And I don't ever want to be a part of something like that.
Fair enough. And I guess that's the whole idea, right? About building strong teams, resilience that are able to stand the test of time. It's that having that dedication towards that quest. And as long as you can keep that eye on never wanting to be in that situation, never wanting to be exposed, emperor without the clothes, then that becomes something that every day one can always look at and say, this is, how am I not impacting, or how did I do something at the expense of other people? So that's incredibly interesting. So now that we've jumped into the first pillar, or the without a doubt, never go anywhere without pillar, I think I would love to now jump into the second, or hell, you can choose whichever pillar you want. Which one would you then say is sort of right behind that first foundational?
I think what comes next is a combination of two pillars, empathy and compassion. And
Okay.
those are extremely important and two very different things. Compassion is the ability to show concern to an employee who may have something going on in their life, and you have the ability to help them resolve that. You may not be able to fix it, but you can show compassion and maybe direct them in a way to solve that. I'll give you an example. I noticed that you came in this morning and your chin was a little down and you weren't smiling. You weren't your jovial self. And I would call you and I'd say, hey, let's chat. And I'd say, I sense that you're a little off today. Is there everything okay at home? Is anybody in your family ill? And let's say his spouse is ill and he's concerned about his spouse. Well, guess what? I have the ability to help him with that, because he's not going to be productive with that mental state that he arrived in. So my responsibility as a leader to get him grounded and get him in a place that is better than where he is. And the way I do that is by giving him time and saying, look, if your wife is ill, you need to be by her side. So take the rest of the day and go be by her side. Don't worry about taking it as vacation. Take it as you worked, but I want you to go be with your wife. That builds loyalty. If I didn't operate with integrity, though, anything I try to do from an empathy or compassion perspective will not be believed and will not be taken as sincere.
And okay, so I guess that's sort of tying it back in, right? Because if nobody's going to believe you, then all your efforts are going to be really, I mean, not really.
Your team's not going to perform. Your team is going to be looking for the next possible way to get out of there and to get another job. And you're going to have to train somebody all over again and invest more time in those people. And you end up with a revolving door.
And so then you said compassion and empathy. What's the difference then? What's empathy? If this is, what's the difference between the two?
Oh, boy, that's a great question. So let me tell you, I'll tell you another story. I worked for a software company or technology company from 1999 to 2007. And I had several departments I was responsible for. And one department was a department that managed a healthcare claim platform that was built in the early 90s and was actually green screen technology. So before we had Windows and mice, we had green screen computers.
Yes.
And you operated them with just a keyboard. And I had 25 people in this department. They were engineers, they were support people, they were account managers, and we had 36 customers on that platform. And we had created new platforms in Windows technology, and we wanted to convert those 36 customers to the Windows technology. However, I had to tell this team that their jobs were going away at some point. And we knew that it would take 8 to 12 minutes, 8 to 12 months, not minutes, to implement a new claim system. And I did not know what to tell them that would keep them grounded and not run out the door for another job. So I wrestled for a week trying to figure out what I was going to say to this team. So I met with the team as a whole. I made them 3 promises. The first promise was every individual would get as much notice as possible as to when I would predict their job going away. But at no time would it be less than 6 months' notice. That was promise number 1. Promise number 2 was if anybody in that department wanted to learn the new technologies, whether they were a software engineer or whether they were a customer service agent, I would provide the training to them during the workday, not after work, not at lunch, but during the daytime. That was promise number 2. Promise number 3 was if you decided you didn't want to stay at the company and you wanted to find a job on the outside, I would personally help you find a job commensurate with your experience and the financial needs of your family, and I would help you secure that job. My only goal was to not have everybody leave right away, and I would always have enough people to manage the customers we had left. I hit that goal, but something else happened. About 2 years into this, I get a call from human resources and they wanted to come and see me. And I thought, boy, what did I do?
A call from human resources is never just a good thing.
Correct. And so these 2 women came in and they sat down in my office. They didn't have an empty box. So I knew, and my boss wasn't with them. So I knew I wasn't getting fired. And they sat down and they said, we want to talk to you about one of your teams. I said, okay. They said, a month ago, we did a company-wide employee satisfaction survey. And that team out in California that you're disassembling and basically getting rid of that department over time as you convert the business, they're the happiest people in this company. And we have 20,000 employees. Why are people so happy and they're going to be out and losing a job? And I said, I don't know. And so they asked me, what was I doing differently than other managers that would make them happy? I said, the only thing I've done is I was truthful with them and I made them 3 promises. And they looked at me like I had 2 heads. And they were like, you made them those 3 promises? I said, yeah. They said, nobody ever does that. And I said, but I needed them to stay. If they all left right away, we'd be screwed. And they actually said, this is unbelievable. And we need to make sure leaders follow what you did because we're going to have this situation again somewhere else. And so they documented everything, and it became part of a training program for managers.
That's amazing. That is very, but go for it.
That's empathy.
The ability to put yourself in or to extend.
Put myself in their shoes. And what I wrestled with was, what would I want my boss to say to me if my
Yeah.
was going away?
What would I want my boss to say to me? That's interesting.
And I would want my boss to protect me. And so I said, I have to protect these people. So I have to help them. So in essence, I removed any worry that they could possibly have and put the burden on myself.
That's interesting. And I guess that whole idea is, again, if you don't have trust, then somebody might feel as though that's a disingenuous sort of approach towards anything that you're doing, right? That you're just
Correct.
pretending to care, just pretending to have that concern. And one thing that I also do love is that it wasn't at the expense of what your objective was. You put forward these promises with their interests at heart, as well as looking to build towards an interest of yours or the interest of the business at the same time, which I think is, you have to be very creative at times to be able to find that commonality between an employee's interest and your interest or the business interest, to then say we're both driving in this way and this is both going to give value for both parties.
Well, you know what's
That's
interesting
interesting.
about that team? There are 2 or 3 people from that team that every year on National Bosses Day, they still send me an email and thank me.
Wow. And I guess that's just a testament to the sort of the strength of connection that you then had with the team.
They would have followed me into battle.
Beautiful.
If we were going to war, they would have followed me into battle. They were that loyal.
And I got a question around sort of trust and culture, right? So the three pillars that we've talked about here, I mean, compassion, integrity, and empathy, those really look to build in a strong layer of trust and a strong layer of within the culture in which you work. It really gives that whole notion that we're in this together and my interests are your interests, and we're going to, and I understand you. You know, you almost, I see you and I can understand you. How do you think that the culture is, are you building a culture with this? Or is it something that you can easily stumble across or easily destroy if, you know, any of these pieces sort of fall away? These three pillars, are they quite integral towards the culture that you're building?
Yes. And the moment that they feel that I'm not being transparent with them or honest with them, when you lose that trust, it's very difficult to gain it back. Very difficult. Because everything you try to do will be seen as, is he really doing the right thing or is he doing something for himself?
And I guess that's the thing. It's like losing trust is an incredible journey to try to walk back on. And then in terms of then building culture, how does trust and culture sort of work together in your view?
I think that the framework of the pillars and trust happen naturally because of the integrity, compassion, and empathy, which these are all soft skills. They're not rocket science, mathematical equations, but they're damn hard. And you can't just teach them. And you have to evolve with your teams and employees because every team is different. And so what I tried to do in the book is I talk about the pillar. I tell a story about the pillar. I tell how to implement the pillar, but I do one other thing. I give real world examples of leaders that they would recognize, of big companies leaders,
Yeah.
that they could go read about that leader and see that that leadership trait exists. So for example, for integrity, I use Satya Nadella, the CEO and chairman of Microsoft. When he entered Microsoft in 2014, he instilled a level of integrity and said, this is the way we're going to operate. And he has never wavered from that.
Wow. And so for every single pillar, for those of who are going to read the book, there's an example of a book or of a leader that essentially talks to the pillar itself and therefore
At
gives
least
you
one.
an at least one.
And in some cases, more than one.
Wow.
And And it includes the references of where they could go look to find that.
That's interesting. And do you feel that, so there's a component of reading and sort of digesting what somebody else has done. Then there's the part where you exercise the muscle of your own ability to do those things. So whether it is integrity, compassion, or empathy, how then does one build that muscle to be able to exercise that integrity on their own part? Like, do you have ideas on how people can work on it as opposed to in addition to reading about it?
Yes. So I tell them steps of how they could implement each of the pillars. And I'm also going to be launching a coaching program.
Okay.
And in that coaching program, it can be delivered one-on-one. It could be delivered in a group setting via Zoom, or a company can hire me to come in and do it as a training part of their program.
All right.
And the foundation is really the 6 pillars in the book, but the exercises get harder in that session.
What do you mean they get harder?
Well, they get a little bit more complex.
Okay,
And
fine.
we force people to think about, things in their life that have impacted them that where they may not have used that pillar correctly,
All right.
and talk about what happened as a result.
I guess then it's that uncomfortable nature confronting one's own the
Fears.
inner thoughts, fears, the rest of it. Okay. So we are on pillar 3. We've got 3 pillars down, halfway. I am curious to understand where we're going to go with number 4.
So number 4 and 5, much like 2 and 3, sort of go together, but they're different.
All right.
First one is focus, and the second is stability. So when I think of focus, I think of having a vision of what my goal is and never losing sight of the end goal. And I'll give you an example. In the early days of Amazon, Jeff Bezos was selling just books online out of his garage. And as Amazon grew, they had a terrible customer service reputation. It was so bad that Jeff himself felt that his manager who was running it was not going to be capable of fixing it. So instead of charging that manager with fixing the problem, Jeff went and put a desk in the center of the customer service department and sat at that desk and watched exactly what happened day in and day out.
Wow.
And he fixed it. He kept the leader over that department and then handed it back to that leader. But he said, if I don't focus on this, I'm not going to have a company. I have to fix it.
That's beautiful.
That's focus. Now, stability is a little bit different because stability is always behaving the same way in everything that you do and act. You don't scream at the top of your lungs, but your tone and your voice inflection is stable and consistent, and you do the same thing every day. And for that, the person who I think every time I've ever heard him speak, he's always the same. And that's Warren Buffett. He's done the same thing for years. You never see him get agitated. You'll see him smile, you'll see him laugh, but he does the same thing. When he looks for assets, companies that are undervalued, buys them, fixes them, and sells them.
Yeah.
Right? But he does it the same way. And so now that he's retiring, the person that's going to step into his shoes, all he has to do is follow that stability of roadmap, that roadmap of stability.
Interesting. And I guess there's a simplicity around that roadmap of stability where people are able to learn you, people are able to understand you better because there's a consistency around how you operate and the expectations you put forward and the way that you operate. So I'm sure that it's as much about it's giving people the opportunity to understand you and to then work that journey with you. Would you say that's fair? Okay.
That's fair.
But then now in a space where things are changing, I mean, navigating change, navigating growth, navigating circumstances. I mean, we've seen in recent times that, things are changing within the world that we live in, whether it's the technology coming into play, whether it is competition from different angles, whether the way that we do business is changing. how then is it possible to have a really strong sense of stability or a strong level of focus when around you things seem to be a bit more manic?
So what's interesting is if you go back in time or look to the future, these pillars don't change. The world can change and we may have to adapt a little to the change, but the world isn't going to just do away with integrity. Although right now in this world that we live in, there is an extreme lack of integrity in a lot of places. And I think if you look at some of the best companies, you'll find that the best companies are managed and led by integrity.
So essentially, I mean, the pillars, regardless of the change, regardless of navigating times, they still provide that roadmap that you could you don't need to follow in order to be able to. You shouldn't follow in order to be the best version of yourself. You have to pick that path
And they
and
will stand the test of time.
understand the test. That's actually the important thing, right? If you want to stand the test of time, then being able to apply these pillars allows for an individual and or company to get through that. Interesting. And then when we look at sort of that stability piece, right? Surely there's something to be said about, you've got those eccentric, loud, larger than life sort of personalities, right? That either slightly unpredictable or slightly, today they're up here, tomorrow they're not there. But really what they do is that level of energy can either excite, bring up a team. There's something that's to be had about having that passionate leader that can come in and at moments be passionate and then sometimes go down. And surely there's a place for that. Or how then do you balance out that stability when we're talking about being able to show that emotion, show that passion and create that variability in terms of the way that you either present a case or the personality that you might be?
So I'll tell you a story. Told you we were going to tell a story.
Love stories. I love stories.
So I was sitting in my office at a company I worked for one day, and I heard these two women arguing outside my office and down the hallway a little. And they were two of my employees, one of which was a manager and one of which worked for that manager. And they were arguing about a customer and it was getting escalated. And so I went into the hallway and I said, "What's going on?" "Well, we have a disagreement. We have a customer with a problem and I want to fix it this way. And this person wants to do it this way." And I said, "Let's go sit down in my office and talk about it." Got him in my office, sat down, started to talk about it. And I very quickly realized that they were so wrapped around the axle about wanting to be right that they didn't see the forest through the trees, and that if they actually combined both of their ideas, it was an even better opportunity for resolution with the customer. But they both had a personality of, "I'm not going to be wrong and you're going to want to do it my way." And as I sat there, I finally said to them, "So have you thought about doing both?" And they looked at me strangely and I said, "Well, if you do what this person is saying, if you do it this and you put them together, doesn't that seem like it will go a lot further than just half of that?" And one of the individuals, they were both female, and that which really doesn't matter, but one of the individuals started to cry. And I always have a box of tissues on my desk. So I took my box of tissues and I handed them to her. And I said, "I'm sorry if I made you upset. What did I say that made you upset?" The response was the following: "You made me upset because you always do the right thing. And we didn't see it. We're smart enough to know that we should have been thinking about what's the best thing for the customer as opposed what's the best thing that I think is for the customer." And she was emotionally upset because they had the power to resolve it, but they couldn't see through their own egos to be able to put the two ideas together.
Wow. Yes, and when you put it like that, then idea of being able to step back
And take a look.
and take a look, right? That becomes now where what we strive for is not getting caught up in things, essentially in noise and losing sight of the focus. Number 6. Now we are at the absolute apex. Number 6. What is that
Hu-
sixth pillar?
Humor.
Humor, like jokes.
No. I am not talking about being a comedian at the water cooler every morning at 10 a.m.
Damn, I thought you were giving me the go ahead to just stand there and
No,
make jokes. No.
no,
All right,
no.
fine.
It's the ability to use humor to get people's attention or focus at the start of a meeting, to diffuse a tense situation, and or to redirect the team because they may have gone astray on what their mission or what they're being asked to do. And most of the time, our society today is so hypersensitive. I remember as a kid telling Italian jokes. I'm Italian, and you can't do that today. People get offended. And so when I talk about humor, it's usually self-deprecating humor,
Yeah.
something that I did that was stupid or dumb or funny, and showing people that I am human, no different than they are. And humor makes a leader approachable and just like everybody else.
Yeah. I find that very peculiar to include that as a sense of sort of a leadership style, because sometimes that idea that, it's the balance, I guess maybe is the word, right? How does a leader who is supposed to get things over the line, give that vision, get people to follow and listen, but then having that balance to be able to be humorous or to self-deprecate, to not necessarily take themselves too seriously, right? Like that they end up just being stuck up. I mean, surely there's a point where it's too much, and I guess that's why you were saying I shouldn't stand by the water cooler. But how do you manage that?
It's hard because you've got to be careful. And you got to be careful because people are sensitive, right? And they're not only sensitive, but they're quick to react. But it's important for me, it's important for my teams to understand that I'm approachable, that I'm fair, that I'm reasonable, and I'm not going to fly off the handle and the other bad things some people do. And humor helps with that. When I think of humor, my personal belief is in this country, the last great president we had was Ronald Reagan. And he started every discussion with a funny story, usually about a farmer, or usually you can go on YouTube and just check him out. But he always had something humorous to say to get people's attention. And he used it highly effectively.
And I guess then it's also why you're doing something humorous, right? It's to get the attention, to draw away from or diffuse it, redirect. Like those elements allow for you to realize when you should be doing it. And if you're doing it outside of that context, then you're probably doing too much. I mean, that's very fascinating. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
you've got to be very specific and strategic about where and how you use it.
Gosh. So I think for me around this conversation, it's been absolutely enlightening, because not only have we touched on, sort of the 6 pillars, and please do remind me the name of your book, which essentially we've just been talking about, really. What is that? What's the name of that book?
The 6 pillars of effective leadership, a roadmap to success.
Success. All right. So if I am looking for a successful roadmap, not only should I listen to the podcast, but I guess that book is the one that really, I mean, this is just a snippet of what's in that.
$290.
And you've got to be cheap if you're not buying a 2.9. That's a really good price for, I mean, something that's packed with what seems like such a
It's and
fullness
it's
of
not.
information.
It's under 200 pages,
Okay.
and I have a lot of reviews online, book reviews, and everyone has commented. Not everyone. Many of the reviews talk about it is not filled with mumbo jumbo theory. It is practical and it is implementable. And I had an individual yesterday approach me at this conference and told me he read the book, and and I said, "Did you like it?" He said, "I'm going to tell you something about that book. That book that shouldn't be read by anybody. It should be studied." And it took me back for a second, and I didn't understand. I really didn't comprehend what he was saying. But what he said, what he meant was the book really can have a significant impact on people who want to be a better leader if they take it and they use it as a roadmap to guide themselves.
That's very interesting. And with that, I think it really ties into the quote of this episode. And I think I think though they seem simple in terms of the pillars, they are definitely packed with a large, great blueprint, also I mean, the actions that you then talk about are so interesting. The quote of the episode is, loyalty is hard to find, trust is easy to lose, actions speak louder than words. And the reason why I felt that this discussion was really embodied within that quote is because not only did you start in 1983 within college, jumping straight into leadership, you quickly realized when you first got your sales job that you wanted to build loyalty. You wanted to build that connection and you wanted to build a following. And though that is, you appreciated that that is not something that's easy to come by, but it required you to work through a set of, and then this is in hindsight, obviously, but a set of rules, a roadmap that you might call. And over the years, you've really worked from 18, getting it down to 6. And that's what's encapsulated within the book that you've written. And even though you've got, your full-time C-suite day job, this passion and this real big focus really speaks to the care and the love that you have towards trying to build and grow teams in a sustainable and in a manner that is sort of looks to withstand the test of time. And that is no more embodied within that center pillar, the one that keeps the roof up and the rest sort of support. And that's integrity. And I think within integrity, you talked about trust, following, transparency, and consistency, because at the end of the day, when you were 22 years old and you walked into the city government role, and that in the person that you were reporting to highlighted, what did you do today that was at the expense of somebody else? And in that moment of reflection, you had to think of two things: how you could unwind or undo that, and how do you never do that again? And that essentially changed the trajectory around how you build trust, how you build loyalty, and the actions that they're therefore followed. Because it's good enough to talk, but it's also easy to lose trust, and loyalty is hard to find. And as long as people know that they can depend on you, and there's a level of consistency and reliability, then it is easier to build a team. It is easier to build the right leadership style. It is easier to have the question at the back of your mind when you're faced with a tough decision as to whether or not you're doing this against somebody or this does the interests of other people are taken care of. And with that, you're able to be true, to have integrity, and then build off of that center pillar. Because and I completely agree with you. That notion of trust, that notion of having people that know that they can look at you and they can depend upon you becomes an integral part of building a sustainable and a team that can withstand time. Not having a team that is essentially sitting in a Titanic of moving chairs where things are going to eventually fall, slip, and it's eventually going to sink. Before time, you'll realize that if your leadership style doesn't lend itself towards integrity, you will get found out eventually. And that quickly and easily rolled into the next two pillars, which is empathy and compassion. And some might argue, what is the difference between the two? Because I kind of felt like they're the same thing. But really, the ability to show concern and try to do something about it. And that requires you to connect with people, requires you to understand somebody, the humanity of that individual. And that then ties in further towards loyalty and knowing that somebody can depend on you because they will see you whether they're in your good moments or in their bad. And I think that's the essence of what I've been getting through this pillars, is that not only do you want as a leader to be seen and to be approachable, but you want to be able to see others in their pain, in their success, and as they grow. And when or else you guys are going to be sitting around a revolving door as people sort of move past. And when you then spoke about empathy and how you had your team had to convert 36 customers from MS-DOS or a green screen and then go over into a space where they could potentially be losing their jobs. And you made them 3 simple promises. Every individual will get at least notice, and you will let them know as soon as possible. Anybody who wanted to learn, they could do that in the time of work. And number 3, if they didn't want to stay, you're going to support them. All those 3 things really put you in their shoes and how you could assist them in the way that you would want to be assisted, in the way that you would like for the communication to occur. And if you as a leader are able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and then be able to provide to them a level of understanding, a level of reasoning that they cannot fault you for, that essentially has your interests at heart, then within that, you also build a level of loyalty, a level of trust. And even though it might be bad news and it might be difficult news, that ability to communicate something difficult and to do it in a way that they can empathize with, or you empathize with them, really allows for people to take bad news a lot better, and also helps a leader be able to navigate stormy waters, navigate difficult times, build that loyalty, because trust is not easy to get, and also it's quite easy to lose. And I guess that then really snowballs into that whole focus and stability. And that focus piece is all about having that vision and a goal and never losing sight of it. Whether you have to sit in the middle of your customer care office like Jeff Bezos did and make sure that things are going the way they need to go. That focus, that dedication to a cause really lets people know that, number one, this particular thing is serious, or you are striving towards supporting and getting to a certain place, because it's easy to change up people, but to support people by providing them a level of focus or providing them a level of support is incredibly difficult. And being able to be a leader that can do that is absolutely tremendous. And then there's the stability piece, where behaving in the same way allows for people to be able to understand you, for you to be able to connect, to be able to grow, and for people to feel safe. And I think more so than anything across this entire roadmap, I've really picked up that the ability to connect with people, the ability to build loyalty, to build trust, and to have your actions match with your words, really gives the people that you work with a level of safety, a level of comfort that I am in a place that my interests are taken care of, and I am not necessarily in this alone. And I think one of the things that some leaders tend to struggle with is that ability to make somebody's environment a lot safer, and for them to feel also seen through that process. Now, I think the last pillar is the one which really caught me off by surprise, and that humor piece. And though I'd love to channel my inner Kevin Hart, you really you poured water on that idea, because at the end of the day, it should have purpose. It should be founded upon something that an intentionality, not funny for being funny, but rather attention, focus, diffuse, redirect, but it should have a purpose to it and not to overdo it. And with that, you are able to not only be seen as approachable, but to also maybe even have an opportunity to be self-deprecating, not put yourself on a pedestal that everyone tries to put you on as a function of being in a leadership role. And those 6 pillars really try to challenge individuals in ways that I guess will make you a better leader, will help people work with you, trust you, believe, and know, more so than know, that their interests are being taken care of within that setup. Jim, it's been absolutely fascinating having the opportunity to discuss your book with you today. And though the synopsis didn't cover many elements, I think I tried my best to really tease out what I saw as the most important and the very interesting elements of what your book has to offer to not only myself, but also to the listeners at hand.
Actually, you did a great job of summarizing. You did a great job. You nailed it. You nailed it.
Appreciate it. And I think the thing that really resonates with us, both of us, in terms of why we're doing what we do, is that idea of impact, that idea of change, that idea of being able to grow. And as much as your book does provide those 6 different elements, and I love the fact that you mix in other books, other leaders, other examples, that really gives it a well-rounded view. I also would love to encourage any of the listeners to not only get the book, but also to follow or look at the Transformation Leadership course on the heart of leadership, because though necessarily not the pillars might not be the same, the essence of what I talked about, we touch on very similar things. And I think I resonate a lot with what you've put forward, because the T4L course also carries some of that learnings and some of those those messages. And quite frankly, the book that you've put forward can really supplement what we're trying to learn as listeners of the podcast, but also people trying to get better, be better leaders without a roadmap, trying to figure this out because someone somewhere out there thought they were smart enough that we were smart enough to be in the position. And sometimes that job title does not equal leadership. A leader can be without a job title. And these tools and tips and tricks and trades, I think the insights that you do share within your book allow for people to stand over and beyond that space. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't know if you've got any parting words that you'd love to share.
No, I just thank you for allowing me to be on your show. I had a great time. We had a great conversation. I hope this resonates with your audience.
Well, if it doesn't resonate with the audience, it resonates with me. So I can tell you one thing, I'm officially 1 hour smarter than I was yesterday. So I do hope more of our audience also enjoyed it, but I can tell you for free, I really enjoyed it. I'd love to thank you so much for your time today. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Transformation Leader. You can follow us at www.t4leader.com.